In this lesson, we'll explore comments, which are a critical part of any programming language. Comments are used to mark lines that are ignored by the Ruby interpreter when the code is executed. So they're particularly helpful for a variety of reasons. Programmers can use comments to offer explanations about their code. They can use it to temporarily invalidate a piece of code to see how the program runs without it. That's helpful in things like debugging or trying to find errors. Programmers can even use comments to just add aesthetic formatting or to separate the little bits of code into their own sections. So let's dive right into it. Single line comments in Ruby start with the hashtag symbol or the hash symbol. That's the one on your keyboard that you can access by pressing Shift 3. So here's an example of a hash. And if I write a hash at the beginning of a line, anything that I write on that line after that symbol is going to be ignored by the Ruby interpreter when the code is executed. So if I write something like this is a comment, that's a valid comment, and when I execute, nothing is going to happen. Nothing is going to appear on the Atom runner on the right. As an example, what I can do here is write a valid bit of Ruby code, for example, puts hello world. And this, of course, is going to show up on the right. It's a valid example of the puts method. As soon as I add that hashtag at the beginning of line number 3, you can see even in the Atom editor, it becomes grayed out. That's Atom's way of telling us that it is no longer valid. As soon as I add that hashtag at the beginning, it's no longer a line that's going to be interpreted and executed. Ruby knows to recognize the hashtag as an indicator of a line that it's supposed to ignore. So when I execute this code, you'll see that the hello world on the right is going to disappear. It's no longer going to be rendered because that puts hello world method is never actually going to be executed. This hashtag right here tells Ruby to completely ignore it. So this is really helpful when you want to invalidate a bit of code. As I mentioned, programmers can also use comments simply to offer explanations. For example, if I write a valid method like puts hello world, I can use the hashtag on the line above and write something like this prints out hello world to the Atom runner output. And you can see here my valid puts command is going to register right here, and this comment is going to be ignored, but for any programmers who are reading the file, it offers a little bit of clarity about what it is that I'm doing in the code below. And you don't have to provide comments for every single line. You can provide comments before a set of lines or in between a set of lines. It really is up to you how you'd like to structure it, but programmers frequently use comments to explain what their code is doing or is about to do. There is another way that we can actually write comments, and that's after a valid piece of code. So for example, I'm going to remove this line right here, and after puts hello world, I'm going to put a hashtag right after and write prints hello world to the console. Now in this scenario, this is an alternate format. Anything that occurs after the hashtag on that line is ignored. So this part is a comment. Ruby is going to ignore it completely. However, anything before it is still valid Ruby code, so this is going to be properly executed and we're going to get the same result. Hello world is going to be printed on the right there. That's completely different, of course, compared to if we place that hashtag at the very beginning of the line. That invalidates the entire line and nothing is going to be output in our Atom runner. Now there is an alternate syntax for multi-line comments. That means comments that extend across multiple lines. It's generally not preferred and generally not used, but I do want to introduce it in case you run into it. So the regular way, the preferred way to use multi-line comments is simply to put a hashtag at the beginning of each line. So for example, if I had a long section of code, I can say in this section of code, we are going to do operations A, B, and C. Here I've commented out every single line there with the hashtag so Ruby can ignore it, and I can use this to describe what my code is doing. The alternative to this is a slightly different syntax. It's also a little bit more difficult to memorize. That's another disadvantage. But what you can do is write equals begin, and then let's create a few line breaks here and write equals end. So the equal sign has to be there, and then without any spaces, we write the word begin and the word end in the bottom example. And anything that goes in between these two lines is basically going to be commented code. So if I write something like puts 1 plus 1 and puts 5 plus 3, puts hello world, let's do another P in here, P blah blah blah. nothing is going to output. Everything in this Ruby file right now is basically a comment, so there's nothing, no valid Ruby code for it to execute. Now, as I mentioned, this syntax, this second option of doing things is generally not common and not popular, so I just wanted to introduce it just so you're aware of it. And the last thing I wanted to show you is a little bit of an Atom shortcut that you can use to instantly create comments. So let's say I have this valid collection of code, these 4 lines. We can see them output to the right on my Atom runner. Instead of going to each line and adding a hashtag manually, what you can do is select them all. So I'm going to hold the Shift key and just use my down arrow to select those 4 lines. And then on a Mac, you can press Command and then the /. And what that's going to do is automatically comment that code. On a Windows, that should be Control and the / Control and the / in order to create a comment. If you want to reverse that process and go from a comment to a valid line, in other words, remove the hashtag, you can just execute that command again, and it's going to return it back to its original position without the hashtag. So here I am alternating between the two concurrently. And I can do the same thing right here, for example, and get that result. However, keep in mind that these are not valid lines of Ruby code, so this would trigger an error. So I'm going to recomment it again. So that's an introduction to comments. They're used to mark lines that are ignored by the Ruby interpreter. I may use comments throughout the course whenever I want to offer myself a quick description of what I'm about to do or offer a little bit of clarity, but they are very common in professional code as well. So definitely something to get used to as you proceed with Ruby.